So thanks to those of you who are joining us. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm joining this meeting today. And I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of all the places from which people are joining this meeting today. And I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. This presentation is part of Farmwall's series of events that we're running as part of Biodiversity Month. And this one's about citizen science. So I'll talk a bit about citizen science, what it is, who does it, and how we can benefit from it and why it's relevant to biodiversity. And then I'll share a few cool citizen science projects that have been happening or are currently happening in Victoria. So before I start with what is citizen science, I thought I'd start with what is biodiversity. The reason I decided to do that is because it's Biodiversity Month, and citizen science is a really, really useful tool for a lot of different research projects, but primarily the benefits have been seen in biodiversity, so in research about plants and animal life, and that's what biodiversity is. The more of it we have, the better, and the more we know about it, the better. One, so we know what's out there. Two, so we learn more about the animals, what they need, what they like, and most importantly, what we can do to support their life and presence and promote their presence in our environments and our ecosystems. Just like everything, there's strength in diversity. If you have really high biodiversity, you have a really diverse and wide range of life forms, and that is what makes an ecosystem become particularly strong. And citizen science, like I said, is one of the most helpful tools in terms of understanding biodiversity. So what is it? In short, it's public participation in scientific research. And it's in the name. Citizen science is citizens helping with science. It's been described as, I'm quoting here, public participation in scientific research. And then it involves people participating in monitoring and actually actioning the research, so doing the research, doing surveys, stuff like that. And then also it can include citizens taking part in reporting on outcomes, studying outcomes, analysing outcomes, and then even playing a part in deciding what's next and what to do with that research knowledge and those outcomes. It has a lot of benefits, and one of the reasons it's so good is because anyone can do it. In the past, particularly before the dawn of the internet, science was really, there was, I guess the right word I'm looking for is there was gatekeepers to science, and that was academics, people who could afford to have a higher education. And what's changed with the modern world changing, with information becoming more accessible, is that anyone can do science, anyone can take part in really, really high level, really, really advanced science. And they can do that through scientific research. The other reason it's so good is because there's usually a passion and drive and an energy in a lot of different communities and groups to take part or to help for various reasons. And sometimes it's hard to capture that energy in a really effective way. Citizen science is a really good way to do that. There's a really big potential for collecting a lot of research data. If you think about researching things in the wild, flora and fauna, you typically, for most research, you need to cover a large area, you need to cover a lot of plant species or habitats, you need a lot of equipment, you need a lot of gear, a lot of people involved. It quickly becomes really expensive and really hard. And anyone who's been in research knows that it's not often that you have a lot of money at your disposal or a lot of people to help out. And that's where citizen science comes in. You can collect a huge amount of data from a really wide range if you do it properly and from a really large area. And that's gone a long way in providing information for a lot of big research projects. It's really, really the best utilised when it's utilised in researching nature and biodiversity. And on top of all that, it's really fun. That's one of the other great things about it is it's not like you have to wait till you go to university to do it, and it's not like you need to have a great deal of knowledge or understanding of some of the really more complex things about it. you can get kids involved, and you can basically have anyone involved in it, doing the research or getting out there and being in the outdoors, taking photos or filling out surveys, that kind of thing. There's this group called the Australian Citizen Science Association. They're kind of like a governing body for citizen science, and what they do is they provide a really, really good framework for what actually constitutes citizen science. And that doesn't only let us know what projects we can just call citizen science, but it's actually really useful guidelines if you're setting up your own project, so that you can have a really, really high standard, really, really good practices if you're ever doing a citizen science project. And also it means that all the science projects have a really consistent and shared approach to how they do things. So these principles, they're quite comprehensive if you go and look them up. What I've done is just put them simply in these slides. Number one is they need to actively involve citizens in a scientific endeavour that generates new knowledge or understanding. So obviously it can't be about something that we already know about. There needs to be a good reason behind why you're doing this research. Citizen science projects need to have a genuine science outcome. And that's a big thing. There have been cases in the past where people have framed something as citizen science when it is actually, when you look at their motives and what they're trying to get out of it, it's actually market research for their benefits or something similar. So there needs to be a real scientific outcome, a real benefit to field of science, the field of science that your project is in, science in general, public knowledge, and also a benefit to society. Citizen science can participate in different stages of the scientific process. So it's not just the research phase. Like I said earlier, they can take part in every single part of a research project from start to finish. They can be consulted at the very start to try and formulate the project. And it can go right to the end to deciding, okay, what's next? And another really important part of it is that citizen scientists receive feedback from the project. So it's really important, if you're basically benefiting from someone else's help, a large group of people as well, it's really important that they know what their work is actually doing and what the benefits actually are. And so making your research findings public, readily available, and actually communicating with the people involved is really, really important. Like everything, there's limitations and there are assumptions that you can make, and there's barriers you have, and it's important to recognize those, understand them, and be clear about them, communicate them to anyone involved in the research, organising and putting together, and of course all the citizen scientists involved, so that those boundaries are acknowledged and recognised. Project data and metadata from citizens need to be made public available where possible. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's sensitive information, or sometimes there's a large amount of information that's hard to summarise in a way that's really accessible to the public. But in most cases, it can be done, and it's actually very important that it can be done. And then on top of that, you need to acknowledge everyone that has helped you along the way. Finally, citizen science projects offer a range of benefits and outcomes, and those need to be acknowledged and considered when you're evaluating the project at the beginning and the end. And then finally, you need to take a really serious consideration of any legal limitations around the project, anything that might be about someone's safety or surveying certain groups of people, for example, there are ethics involved, as I rounds off those 10 principles. So a little bit dry, but if you set up any kind of citizen science project, you follow those guidelines, and all the best citizen science projects, you can see really clearly how they've satisfied those 10 guidelines. This is just a small sample of some groups that are using citizen science at the moment or have recently in the past in Victoria. This is a really small sample. Basically, you can look up citizen science projects on the ACSA website, and that's what I did. And I basically found the first 10 or so groups, 10 or 15 groups, and put their logos on here. What I wanted to point out is that obviously a lot of these are government groups. So government, especially big parts of government like the EPA or the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, they benefit greatly from citizen science, because a lot of what they do covers a really large area of Victoria, and also a really large area in terms of policy and practice. And so the more information they get, the better. There's a lot of environmental groups on a smaller scale or a local government scale, a lot of management groups, for example, Melbourne Water and the EPA as well. And then obviously groups that are involved in parks and wildlife, so Parks Victoria, Barra Links, Darebin Creek Lands Management Committee, which is one close to us here at Farmwall because we live next door to the Darebin Creek. So that's just an example of some of the people that benefit from this kind of thing, and they benefit greatly. There's quite a few citizen science projects that are actually happening now, or they happen every year, or they're happening soon, that anyone can be involved in. I've just listed 3 of my favourites. The first one's the Aussie Backyard Bird Count. This is a really, really big one that a lot of people know about. It's often in the news. Basically, there's a 1 week in October, 1 week every year. And what they do is they ask people to sit in their backyard and count all the birds they see. And if they can, identify them and report them. And there's an app that you use to do that. So really, really cool activity to do, especially in October when it's spring and things are really changing a lot in your backyard. You don't have to have a backyard to do it either. You can do it in your front yard, in your nature strip. You can go to your local park, basically anywhere. And it's a really fun one to do, even if you're in the city. And the other one that I really love is the frog census. Frogs are a really, really, really good biomarker, which means that their presence in an ecosystem and the health of their population indicates a good ecosystem. Frogs are sensitive to clean water. They don't deal well with polluted water. And they also have a position in the food chain where, as a predator, their presence indicates the presence of a lot of other things that they might be eating. And also they are a prey, so animals that predate on them, such as snakes and birds. If there are a lot of frogs in a certain area and a lot of specific kinds of frogs, then you can get a really good idea of what other snakes, birds, and other animals might be there as well. Because of that, the frog census is really, really important and something which is kind of hard to survey. Usually frog surveys are done non-invasively, so sitting and listening for frog calls. And if you can see the frogs doing that, which is usually quite hard because they live underwater or in the mud or in really thick bush. And the frog census primarily relies on people listening for frogs, identifying the calls, and they do a really good job of providing information to any citizen scientist about what the calls sound like, and then recording them if possible using their phone and recording it all in the app that they provide. That one is my favourite. I grew up living next to a billabong in Blackburn, which was always really loud with frogs. And so when I found out about the frog census a few years ago, I was really excited to go down and record there. And that information is really, really useful to Melbourne Water and also the environmental groups involved in different parks and wetlands in Victoria. Another one's the Bush Blitz, and this one is probably the biggest one in terms of biodiversity. I'll talk a bit more about it in the next slide. Before I do that, there's literally hundreds of these going on. There's new ones popping up all the time. What you can do is you can go to the Australian Citizen Science website, Citizen Science Association website, and go to their project finder, and you can search for projects there. And you can also select projects in Victoria, projects in bushland, projects that are about insects, frogs, birds, etc. And you can find a project that you like, and you can also find projects in your areas and ones that you can take part in and help out in. The Bush Blitz is pretty much the biggest citizen science project that's happened in Australia. It's amazing what they've been able to achieve in terms of discovering new life and documenting life that we know about in Australia. It's a nature discovery program, and what it is a partnership between the Australian government and that's through Parks Australia, and they collaborate with the Australian Biological Resources Study as well as BHP, the mining company, and Earthwatch. And it's the goal is to document plants and animals across Australia, and that's it. It's a very broad goal, and but what's happened is a big amount of money has been put into it through those partnerships. And it's started in 2010, and they've actually discovered over 1,700 new species of plants and animals, which is amazing, really amazing. So that's 1,700 species of plants and animals that would not have been discovered in the past 11 years had the bush blitz not happened, or probably would not have been discovered. So yeah, like I said, 1,700 new species, and that's, there are a lot that we already know, but there's also a huge amount that we don't know. So this is from the Bush Blitz website. There's an estimated 580,000 to 680,000 species of plants and animal in Australia. 3/4 of it are yet to be identified. So we only know and have only identified 1/4, which is kind of mind-blowing to me, and I hope it is to others when you think about that. And on top of that, 45% of Australia, continental Australia that is, and over 90% of the marine area have never been comprehensively surveyed by scientists. So 90% of Australia's marine area has never been surveyed by scientists, and 45% of our land area, which means that we are really just looking at less than half of what's out there. We've really only scraped the surface in terms of what animals and life there is to identify. Identifying those animals and plants is critical to doing the right things, to protecting them and saving them and making really key decisions about what to do next. The Bush Blitz involves a lot of different people. So there are specialists involved, there are environmentalists, environmental scientists involved at a management level. And then in terms of surveying level, managing smaller projects, there's taxonomists, Indigenous communities, rangers, landowners, and then on the citizen science side of it, landowners, teachers, students, and BHP employees have played a big part as well, with BHP being one of the main corporate partners. So yeah, what I've included there is just a snapshot of the table they have on their website showing the species that they've discovered grouped into taxonomic groups. So 504 new species of spiders have been identified since 2010 through the Bush Blitz program. And that's been the number one thing. I don't know why. I didn't dig deep enough to figure out why it's spiders. I don't know if we have more spiders than anything else, or if it's easier to find spiders, or maybe something about citizen scientists being most scared of spiders means that you're more likely to see one on the ground and freak out and then realize you've seen something new or something cool. But then also bugs, moths, plant lice, bees, beetles. If you look at the table on the website, which extends much, much longer than the snippet that I've shown here, you see that it's primarily insects and bugs. And that's no surprise if you know just how many different species there are out there, and just how many we're pretty sure we don't know about. And they are kind of like frogs. Their presence in different areas tells a lot of the story about what's going on there, whether it's going well, whether there's things that need to change, whether there's actions that need to happen. But of course, there's also been some mammals, rodents, some crustaceans, sea sponges, fish, and lichens, moss, fungi, all sorts of different life that have been discovered. Reading the statistics about the Bush Blitz is mind-blowing, and it tells a really big story. One, the story of success of Bush Blitz, but two, the story of how little we know, and how if we're making decisions to protect biodiversity in Australia, we need to learn a lot more. Citizen science is really one of the best tools for doing that. So before we finish, I thought I'd include this little, it's not biodiversity related, but it's a citizen science task that is quite topical, because this morning there was an earthquake in Victoria, as you would know if you're joining us from there, or even New South Wales or South Australia or Tasmania. Apparently it was one of the biggest earthquakes Victoria's ever felt, 5.8 on the Richter scale out in Mansfield, and there's been 7 or 8 aftershocks since then. Which is all very exciting. And at Farmwall, we were all in a Zoom meeting when it happened. The reason I'm including it is because there's actually something you can do anytime you feel an earthquake or a tremor. You can actually be a citizen scientist and immediately fill out a little survey that says that you felt it. And so a lot of people have been doing that today on Geoscience Australia. The screenshot that I've shown you on this slide here I took it about an hour and a half ago. And those are all the reports of this morning's earthquake. So you can see the red dot in the middle, that's where the earthquake was. And then the color of those squares indicates the strength of the reports. So near that earthquake epicenter, you can see that it's a yellower color. That means there are a lot of reports of a medium intensity earthquake felt. And then as you go out, they go weaker and weaker, purple being the weakest, blue being feeling it lightly. So what I thought I'd do is share my screen on the Geoscience Australia website and actually fill out my felt report and do a bit of citizen science right now. So here it is here. This is the website. You can see here the epicenter of the earthquake. And if I zoom in on that, you'll see there's actually quite a few little circles. There's the main one, which is the biggest one, and then all the aftershocks around it. And that's roughly where they were felt. What I can do as a citizen scientist is click up here, this felt report, and I can fill it out. So did you feel an earthquake? I sure did. Which earthquake did you feel? Well, these are all the most recent earthquakes listed here. It's the north of Rawson. So in the media, they've been saying it's in Mansfield, but on Geoscience Australia, they say it's north of Rawson. And the one that I felt, the only one that I felt was the first one, which is that 5.9 magnitude earthquake at 9:15. So I'll click that. What was my situation during the earthquake? I was inside a building. I was at home in my bedroom. Was I asleep? No. Did others nearby feel it? They sure did. I know everyone at work felt it, and we were all roughly within the same area. I also know that all my neighbours felt it, so everyone felt it. How would you describe the shaking? Well, I like to be dramatic. At the time, I would have said violent, but I think that I guess we don't experience too many earthquakes here, so I don't actually know what it was. I would say it was mild, just shaking, no damage. Books weren't flying off the shelf or anything like that. The cat did freak out, but she's pretty timid. How did I react? I'm sure my colleagues could say that I was very excited about this. I definitely wasn't frightened. I actually wasn't taking it seriously at all, so I'll say that I was very excited. How did I respond? I took no action. I'm sorry to say. Probably should have run outside or stood in a doorway, which apparently was the wrong thing to do now that I've read today. Sitting in a doorway is actually less safe than going under a desk. Was it difficult to stand or walk? No, it wasn't. Did I notice any swinging of doors or other free hanging objects? Not in my place. Did I hear creaking? Yes, I did. Yeah, a little bit of creaking in the walls. Did objects rattle, topple over and fall off shelves? Everything rattled quite loudly. Nothing fell though. So as you can see, this survey is quite comprehensive. What they know is that the more information they get from a citizen like myself or the hundreds of people who have filled this out today, the better. I imagine a lot of this is to understand, one, how humans respond. So for example, what I chose to do, but also then, the feeling of an earthquake, I imagine, is subjective. And so by asking these questions about things moving around, about rattling in the building, they can actually turn that into more of a objective measurement and understand, okay, my personal expression of it might be that it was violent and I was very excited, but actually the windows just rattled a bit. Did pictures on the walls move or get knocked askew? No, which is a surprise because I'm not very good at hanging up my pictures properly. Did any furniture or appliances slide, topple over or become displaced? No. Was it a heavy appliance affected? Nah. Were freestanding walls or fences damaged? No, they weren't. Was there any damage to the building? No damage. And then I'll type in my address and it'll submit the survey. And so as of today, I'm a citizen scientist and I don't need a degree. I don't need a qualification. I don't need to have a resume that shows that I've done science projects in the past. I don't need to basically anything. All I am is a citizen from any background, any walk of life, any location, and submit report. I'm officially a scientist. That feels good. what you can do once you've done these, you can look at the felt cluster map. So it's a map that shows where everyone has reported they've felt the earthquake. Hopefully you can see that on my shared screen. There's been shared screen, sorry, there's quite a few reports there. If I close that, then yeah, you can get a good idea there. So that's it. I'm a citizen scientist. If you're in Victoria or you felt this earthquake from New South Wales or Adelaide, I recommend going to do this and contributing. Apparently, it goes a very, very long way in helping the scientists at Geoscience Australia, and I'm sure other groups, understand what's happened, but also understand what to do next. So that's it. I thought I'd wrap up with that. Like I said, this event is part of our Biodiversity Month series of events. And if you've come from Farmwall's ecosystem, then you can go to the events tab there and see the other events that are happening this week. Or you can go to farmwall.com and see the products we're offering, including a product that we're offering as part of Biodiversity Month, which is a seed bomb kit. And if you've come from Eventbrite and not from Farmwall's ecosystem, you can join the ecosystem by purchasing one of our products, so one of our kits or one of our products that comes with a course, and that's delivered through ecosystem. And that's our online community of everyone who's involved in our urban farming products and initiatives. We share things there, share pictures, collaborate, stuff like that. So thanks for joining. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself and yeah, ask away. Or if you just want to talk about your earthquake experience this morning, that's fine too. If you do have any other questions that come to your mind after this presentation ends, you can message the email address that was attached to the event. So that's media@farmwall.com.au, or you can, if you're in ecosystem, you can post or message us in there. So thanks for coming. Appreciate it and hope to see you again soon.